All right, guys, welcome to another episode, Florida Hockey Bros podcast. My name is David. I'm joined by my brother next to me there on the screen, Dario. Before we get started, my brother Dario made a video the other day on the Maple Leafs, and it was it's a really good video. I'm gonna link it on the description if you guys want to watch it. He kind of does a breakdown of the Columbus game, and that was right before Samsonov was waived. And he kind of gives a breakdown of the team and why it goes beyond the goaltending. Really interesting video. There's some screenshots on there, and he put a lot of work into that video. So I'm gonna link it in the description. Like I said, make sure you guys watch that. Anyway, we're gonna actually kind of stay on topic there. We're gonna start with the Nylander contract rumors, how that compares to Sam Reinhart with the Panthers, even a player like Verhaeghe with his production now. Verhaeghe's probably having his best season already with us. And then from there, we'll get into the Florida Panthers 6-game winning streak, the game last night against Vegas, the way Bob has been playing, some of the key players contributing for the Panthers right now. So anyway, Dario, what do you think about the Nylander contract rumors? Nick Kiprio's mentioned on Kipper and Born that word is that Nylander and the Leafs are closing in on a new contract for Willy, somewhere in the $11 million range for 8 years. What do you think about not just the contract, but how that compares with the Panthers, etc., and just how are they even going to be able to do that when you take into account next season Tavares is still there, his contract is still there, so I don't even know how they're gonna be able to manage that. But yeah, give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's kind of a situation similar to the Panthers and Reinhart in terms of, Reinhart having a career year and Cito having to decide what to do with that. I don't think it would be the same amount of money we're talking about, but similar kind of situation with a player that's been good, and like has the talent and has been having career years recently, but then this year on their contract year are just kind of taken off. And, they thought they could sign Willy for under 10 this summer. And now that's not possible. And Nylander has the leverage. So, I'm less interested in terms of the amount. I mean, to me, there's a couple of ways they can go. One is they sign him for whatever amount, whether it's between 11 and 11.5, which is probably what will end up being. And I'm sure they're trying to find other incentives to get that number down. But it's probably why, the last few days, that's usually what it is. They're trying to tinker and, the no trade clauses and all that. But I think that they can either just give him the money, and then for next year with the cap going up, that would sort of take care for most of Willy's increase. But then that means that the rest of the team, they're going to be in the same cap situation as this year. I know that, Bertuzzi and a lot of these guys are sort of on 1-year deals. And they have other guys whose contracts are up. So they're going to have quite a bit of turnover, but they won't have as much money as other teams to work with. So they could say, well, this year we think we can compete. Next year we're going to be cap strapped. But again, with these 4 guys, that's the idea, plus Riley, to try to win and then try to plug the holes around and just keep, kind of doing the same thing, but just hoping it goes differently. And then wait for Tavares' contract to come off, and then they can decide what to do with that. That's one way they can go about it. The only other way that I can think they can go about it is try to convince Marner to be traded next year and say, Marner, we're not going to bring you back. We're not going to extend you, which is the only way that will work. I think for Marner to waive the no trade clause would have to be some version of, we want to give you a very low contract or that you don't want, or we can't just fit. We just can't fit you in. So we need you to waive it and then decide, give us a list of teams to go to. So those are the only 2 ways I can see it going. I think trading Marner is tricky. Again, it's like this idea that once you lose the leverage, once you have a player making that much money, you're either going to have to retain. I mean, you've overpaid Marner in a way. And so now,
yeah.
his contract is a little bit more sort of like in line with like Huber or whatever today, but still trading $11 million, which is basically what he makes, is not easy unless you retain, or you're not going to get as much back because then the other team is taking the money. You're opening up that cap space. So this is why trading these guys is tricky unless you really do it at the right time, before, when they're, open for business at the draft over the summer, when teams are a little bit more willing to build, where you can sort of like do a 3-team deal a lot easier, etc. So I think right now they're just going to have to get Willy back. I think they need the names, need the money. And I think that's what the fan base at the end of the day, I hear people talk about breaking up the core four, but every time there's a serious discussion about it, the two things that always come up is, one is we're not going to get back the value, right? Like you're going to lose that trade no matter what, which in some ways is true. Like in some ways you could have argued at the time, like it looked like Cito lost the trade with Hubert or Uyghur in the first round pick. But that's the risk you take, right? If you really believe what you're bringing back is worth it. And you have to think big picture. It isn't just a trade for the next year, but it's a trade for your franchise for the next 5 years. And that's the way that I think Cito approached it. It isn't just about Kachuk, it's about the culture and about what I can build around that. And then the other thing that comes up is like, we're not going to be as good in the regular season. The playoffs are not going to be a given anymore if we trade one of these guys, which I don't agree with, but that's what I think a lot of fans are afraid of and pundits are afraid of. And this is that makes you stuck, man. So I think in this case, they need to bring back Nylander. That's a talented player. You can't just lose that winger at his age, with what he's doing this year. I don't think, value-wise, I'll pause there, but value-wise, when you compare him to like Pasternak or Verhaeghe or some other players, value-wise, like you can make an argument he's not worth the $11.5 million compared to other guys, at least based on his career. I think based on this year, if this is what he is every year and he's going to be a 100 points player every year for the next 5 years, then yes, maybe. But I don't know that he's going to be that. We don't know if Reinhardt's going to be what he's this year every year. So anyway, that's a separate discussion. But from my perspective, the Leafs have no choice at this point but to sign him, keep him, and then decide, I think, over the summer what they're going to do with the core four and whether Marner Spacer goes. And extending Marner isn't going to be cheap either. So
no, I don't know. Man. Yeah, I don't know how they'll do it, but the only thing that's going to save him is in 2 years, you can either re-sign Tavares for half or something like that, because people keep talking about him taking a discount, but he's not going to be making $2 million a year. And that's going to relieve some of the cap. I think their bigger issue for them is basically this season, where they're going to have no cap space, and to make any trades or anything, they will have to trade someone at the deadline, or next year. Next year is where I think it's going to get really tricky for them. I think like if Nylander's on your team, you have to resign him, and if it's worth 11 mil on the market, and that's what I'm sure he basically told the Leafs, hey, no problem, we can wait till the off season, see what offers I get, and this is why, like, if you do have a player and you want to re-sign him, just do it. Don't wait. I think the similarities there with Reinhardt could be that maybe, Cito approaches Reinhardt in the offseason and says, hey, I can give you the 8 years for 8.5, take it now. Whereas, Reinhardt's worth close to 11 million on the market right now. So those contract years are kind of tricky. You see a lot of players get paid based off of that. And then you have to kind of live with the regret. In the case of William Nylander, I do think there has to be some concern. I don't know, any Leafs fans watching this, feel free to comment on what I'm about to say. But my understanding is that, he's a player that has been demoted before. He's had to have the coach, motivate him a little bit. And you don't give those guys tough money. Guys that need to be motivated, that you have to push for them to play their game, that's you don't want to overpay there. It's like Verhaeghe for the Panthers, great scorer, has a really lucky shot, man. He just shoots it and scores. I don't know what it is. He just has that touch, right, for the top shelf. You can't pay Verhaeghe $10 million. You can't even pay him $9 million, because without the right system or a coach that can push that guy, a player like him, you might lose him. You might start getting, 20 goal season, and that's not worth 10 million a year. I know the cap is going up and that's the excuse, but we don't really know how it's going to go up after next season. I think they are stuck. I agree with you there. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they have to re-sign Nylander. You can't just let him walk away. I think from what everybody was saying last season in the offseason, Dubas was going to trade Marner, which would have gotten the biggest return. I think Dubas, it's a dumbass, to be honest. I think Trey Living, it's just okay. He's an experienced GM. That's it. I don't think he's like this creative guru and this genius that's going to make it all work. I'm curious to see what happens like in the offseason for them and how they go forward with no cap. I don't care that Bertuzzi's money comes off the books and Samsonov, that's what, 8 or 9 million right there. I don't know. I don't know where they go from here. That fan base, they just like fall in love with all these silly stuff. Like they love Simone Benoit now, the defender, because he's like hitting people and being physical, something they never like heard of in their lifetime, I guess. And like, if you look at the metrics, he's like a 7th defenseman. Benoit will be the 7th or 8th defenseman in most teams. So anyway, that's a different topic. But yeah, I think in the way that translates to what Cito has to do with the Panthers, there's some similarities there with Reinhart more than anything. You can worry about Verhaeghe next season. But yeah, very interesting stuff. All right. Let's go ahead and transition into. Let's do a bit of a segment on re-signing Reinhart. What do you do with Verhaeghe, Bennett next season? I think that where I'll start there is, if you're Cito, if you're the Florida Panthers ownership, you have to try to keep some of this core together, and you have to kind of determine what the core is going to be and how much you're willing to spend there. Obviously, I think they can move off of Bob's contract next season if they can find a trade partner to take. They can do some salary retention if needed. You can attach, a prospect or a pick for that. And you also have Ekblad. Ekblad's contract is over $7 million left. So you can kind of play with the numbers. I think it kind of works out if Spencer Knight comes up. I think that's the big question. I'm not positive that Spencer Knight's going to be able to be your starter next season. So where would you go if you're Cito? What are you prioritizing? I know we've talked about this in the past with, you have Forsling and Montour as well, need contracts. Where do you start? I think, common sense says you start with Forsling and Montour and then go from there. But where would you start, and how would you build a team in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think, in the conversation about Nylander, one of the things we don't think about as fans is value, like which a good GM and good front office should be thinking about is what you get from a player. What do you get in return for that money you're giving? Some of that is the value isn't just attached to the numbers, right? Some of it is the scoring, some of it is the underlying metrics, the leadership, how healthy they tend to be, what other intangibles they provide on the team, but also, quite frankly, like, are they popular within the team? Are they popular with fans? Are they going to bring people to the stadium? And like, even in Toronto, like, that's one of the reasons why Dubas went with that model. He wanted to have all of these guys and keeping all of them instead of going a different route, as most teams, when they reach that moment where they have to let somebody go or trade somebody, when you have that much talent up top. And he decided to sort of go for it with all these guys. And so, you can make an argument that, like, Pasternak is obviously more valuable than Nylander because of his career, right? Like, his numbers for his career are much better. They're kind of the same. They're the same age, more of a proven player. And for both of them to get the same money might be sort of on the surface, like the wrong decision for for somebody like the Leafs, where Nylander is not your best player. I mean, it's still Matthews, right? And Tavares getting paid a lot of money, and Marner is your best playmaker in terms of passer. Pasternak is kind of now has become the guy. I know Marchand's still there, etc. But Pasternak is, in terms of, so you kind of have to think about, it makes sense to pay Pasternak is what I'm trying to say, because of all the numbers he's put up. He's 60 goals, he's put up a bunch of 40-goal seasons. He's been to the playoffs deep. He's scored in the playoffs. He's not a perfect player, but you know what you're getting. He's still only 27. He's now become the leader, has been under the tutelage of great players like Marchand and Bergeron. So he's your franchise guy, so you pay him a lot of money, right? And we did with Barco, we did with Kachuk, even though in Florida you can pay less. But when you think about what Cito has to do, it's sort of the same thing. It's decide, like Verhaeghe, Reinhart, Montour, Forsling, whatever, like what is the value I'm getting and what am I going to get long term from these guys? And even if I lose on a trade, even if all I'm getting is like a first round pick, which is, not bad, but not, a ton of stuff, you're still going to have to go out and sign and replace guys. That's the other thing. Who is easier to replace? This is why I meant about Nylander being a hard trade, because it's not easy to replace Nylander, right? It's just not. And then, if you did, then you'll have to commit to a different system and a different style, a different kind of team. If you replace Nylander with a great defenseman and then a couple of like role guys, that's going to be a different type of team. Kind of like we did with Kachuk and Huberdeau. We're a very different team than we were. So I think with Reinhart and Verhaeghe, to me, the conversation is more, you first have to decide what to do with Forsling and Montour, man. I think your top four defense is so important. We've become a defensive team. That is the core. That is the identity. I think that what Maurice wants, I think in the playoffs, it's a model that works for a lot of teams. We've seen it with Tampa. We've seen it with a lot of different teams that play a more physical defensive game win. Even the Capitals on their, trots were very physical and more defensive. That was sort of the knock, is that they would score a lot but could never win. So I think that if you don't want to lose that, having Mikkola in place, keeping Montour, keeping Forsling, that feels like a priority. Even with Ekblad, you don't have to trade him. I mean, there's a model in which you keep the top four intact next year because you trust it. And then you plug in the kids, right? Because we have Mackey maybe in the top six, or if in the bottom six, maybe Mike Benning becomes your sixth or seventh guy. And with their ELCs, at least for one more year, and even with the extensions, these guys are not going to make a ton of money right away on the first extension because they haven't played with the Panthers. You can kind of plug the holes with them, and then you have to maybe just let go of one of Verhaeghe or Reinhart because you just money-wise, it just won't work. I've always, for me, Reinhart is a more complete player, right? Reinhart is a guy that can play on the first line, the third line, play center, kill penalties. You can trust him on the defensive end. He's not a physical guy, but he's bigger, tends to be healthy. He's very smart. He's a leader. He's vocal. He's younger than Verhaeghe. Actually, his contract will kick in, at 28 still. Verhaeghe's wouldn't kick in until he's 30. And Verhaeghe is like a clutch player. That's the one thing, right? He has 7-game winning goals the last 2 postseasons. That's insane. I'm talking about Nylander. Nylander has 5-game winning goals in 7 years of postseason, right? And so Verhaeghe's value is there. I'm not saying he's not valuable. He hits. He can be, kind of physical more than people think. One of the goals the other day, came off a really big hit that he put on the offensive zone to get a turnover, and then the Panthers score. So he's a good player, but you could say the same about Reinhart. Reinhart can continue, given that he goes to the front of the net, given that he's smart, that the power plays where he makes his money, and that you can trust him on defense. He was part of that third line with Lundell and Lustranen that was really good on defense against the Leafs, especially. So yeah, the value's there. The question for me is, how much does Reinhart want? Because if Reinhart wants premium money, like premium Nylander money or premium player money, even with the discount in Florida, which would be 10-5, you put him at a Barkov level over Kachuk, and I don't know that he's that every year, right? We just don't know. He might revert back. He might be a 30 goal, 60-point guy, which is great, but that's not 9-10 million, So anyway, to me, you try to keep Reinhart, but at a reasonable number if there's a way to make that work. And if not, then you can trade him. I think there is value in Reinhart. I think all the teams will want him as a centerpiece or one of the top 2 players. Because he's shown flashes of being able to do that. He's a second overall pick in the first round. Whereas Verhage is more of like a typical 30 to 40 goal left winger. That's all he does mostly. And, and he's going to be 30 when the contract kicks in. So he might give you a few good years, but there's always going to be questions about age and health. So I would lean toward Reinhardt, Montour, Forsling if the numbers work. If the numbers don't work, man, then you keep the guy who's willing to take the pay cut and then try to get as many assets, knowing that at the end of the day, outside of Barker and Kachuk, and maybe Forsling actually, most guys are replaceable, right? Maybe not 1-to-1, but maybe you can kind of make up for it in another, maybe you can add another top 6 winger if you lose Montour and you can't replace Montour for the same level of talent, but pretty decent player, then, and have Mike Banning come in and, on the right, and then you maybe splash a little bit more on the top 6 to help the scoring. So anyway, I think Cito has options. I just don't know what he's going to do. I think it all depends on what the final numbers are, what the final contracts that people want are, what he's hearing in terms of trades. I don't think he'll be afraid to pull the trigger. I would personally just prioritize the defense, a defensive system, and teaching defensemen to play this style and to replace these guys who bought in, like Forsling and Montour. That's hard. That, to me, it's harder than replacing, honestly, 20 to 30 goals, which any guy who gets hot can give you.
Yeah. I prioritize the defense as well. I think Forsling is a no-brainer. He's not going to ask you for some ridiculous contract. I think there's just whoever you pair with him, it's going to benefit from playing with him. And then Montour, the only issue is the age. He's 30 years old already, I think. Forsling is 27. So, yeah, I would definitely prioritize Forsling. And even if he wanted a lot of money, I would maybe give him a shorter deal if that's the route that he wants to go on. But he's not this huge scorer, even though he has a great shot. So you can definitely justify, like $7 million for his defensive play. He's a very, very talented player. I love Forsling. It's incredible how we got him through waivers. Amazing. Anyway, and then Montour. Those would be my first 2 approaches. And then based on what Montour wants, and Montour has been playing better. Last night was his best game of the season. He's just all over the ice. You can tell he's trying to get that contract. It's probably his final big contract. So I would prioritize those 2, and then those 2, and then I would definitely approach Reinhardt and see where he's at. If he's like way up there on that like 10+ mil a year, then you're trading him at the deadline, and it is what it is. Typically that doesn't happen. Players like Reinhardt, considering the situation, and he's in the top line, he's almost guaranteed success for the next few years. You have to kind of take a pay cut if you feel like this is what's gonna kind of build your reputation in the league, which is already getting started. He's still young enough. And then for next season, Verhage and Bennett are the 2 big question marks. I think they get a deal done with Lundell and Stenlund, Lumber. Those are the easy decisions in a way, because those guys are cheap. But I think that Cito would have to decide there, and it depends. If they move on from Bob, if they move on from Ekblad, how they manage that money, and what happened with Spencer Knight. I think that's a big question. That's right now, everything's going well. That's my biggest concern for next season and beyond. It's Spencer Knight. I don't know if he's going to be ready to really be a starter in the NHL. We can't have him have all these, bad games and inconsistencies. And I know goaltenders take a while, so maybe this is the idea, is just to bring him on slowly and go from there. Anyway, yeah. All right. Let's transition into the Florida Panthers winning streak. Last night they beat the Vegas Golden Knights. The Knights are going through their own issues at the moment. After they started the season, what was it, like 11-1 or 11-0-1? They're now like 11-12-4. I want to say since then. That's not a minor thing, and it's a little weird. Watching the game last night, I kept expecting them to just come back and win, and it just never happened. Never happened. To be fair, the Panthers were without Barkov and Rodriguez, but they adjusted really well. I think it was really smart to just bring up Lundell and Lusty with Reinhardt. They played together before, so you keep that line intact as your first line, and then our second line basically carried us the whole game. All three guys were amazing. Kachuk had one of his best games of the season. Verhagen, Bennett were incredible on the power play. No mistakes, no. The first period was the only period that was a little shaky. The second and third, we dominated. Vegas had nothing. They had nothing in the third. So yeah, I'm really impressed with the team and Paul Maurice. I don't think that last night happens if not for last season and all the disappointment and all the bad losses and the final being this big disappointment. I think there's like a belief in the system. There's a belief from the players in Maurice and in themselves and in each other that's coming together. It's really nice to watch. You love to see a team grow into, elite level. And you see when they play the Rangers, you see when they play the Knights, you see when they play Tampa, when they play Toronto, even when they play the Bruins. Like, we should have had at least one of those two games that we lost. You see that this team is for real. This is not the same as last season. I think we're going to be there, top 3, top 2 the whole year in the Atlantic. And yeah, man, we're 2 points behind Boston. What do you think? Think we're gonna catch them? I know they got a game in hand.
I mean, knowing us, I don't think we're gonna win the division. Only because I think that there are gonna be injuries again. We're gonna go through some lulls again. I mean, it's natural. Our scoring, it's probably gonna be not as bad as it's been early on based on the chances. Meaning we've gotten a lot of chances and not as much scoring. So that hopefully improves. But I don't know. I don't know that we were built to just win the division. I mean, if we do, that's great. I don't know. I don't want us to win the President's Trophy, and I don't think we will. There's a lot of other teams out there that probably do that, but yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Like, they found a groove. They definitely believe in each other. They're not afraid. Yesterday, I also expected them, especially with like Barkov getting, I don't know if it broke his nose or whatever happened, and Rodriguez is, coming back, but then just leaving the game. You would expect them to just throw the game at some point, or like you said, or at least Vegas take it from them. I think Bob definitely helped early on. I think the penalty kill helped a lot. I think if Vegas had scored early on, it would have been a lot harder to come back because Vegas knows how to shut it down. But yeah, there's something off with Vegas. They started really hard and then became kind of meek. They didn't want to fight. I mean, I know Stone was out there yelling at people and skating and stuff, but like, none of those guys stood up. I mean, the Lumber tried to fight Martinez. They didn't want any of it. White Cloud and Bennett got into it. White Cloud never even threw a punch. It's interesting to see, like, Lustrani hit Petrangelo like super hard. Reinhardt was hitting people. Lumber was running around just hunting, hitting everybody. I mean, clean hits, but just they came to play, and they came to play hard. The power play showed up. The defense took some bad penalties and then were able to kill the penalty. The 5-on-3 was terrible for Vegas. Like, the puck movement was awful. They just kept shooting up top and missing. And so, yeah, there's something off with that team. Definitely did not get the diverse version of them. And I don't know what it is. I don't care on the Western Conference. But for us, it was kind of an identity win. I mean, it is one of those things where, like, the guys stepped up, everybody. They played hard. They started hitting after they killed those penalties. They took the game over, and then by the third, they didn't relent. We outshot them by like 11 shots. We out hit them. Again, without Barkov or Rodriguez. Two of our top liners. So, yeah, man, it was good for the second line to show up. The second line's been a lot better. Bennett's been really, really good lately. I think it just took him a while to get going. I mean, that's the thing with Montour and Ekblad. Like, it's not easy to come back from that long injury and stuff, and the rest of the team is already humming, and now you're changing lines and you're changing pairings, and, it's not easy for everybody. So I like what I see, man. It's good. And so I'm less interested in whether or not we win the division. I want us to finish top 2 or 3 at the worst if we go through a funk. But as long as Bob continues to play well, I think we can stay up top. And then it's be healthy for the playoffs. Give yourself a chance. Maybe at that deadline, make a move or two to just help improve a little bit of the scoring depth. And I like Bob playing well too, because this trade value goes up. Even if we retain money, maybe we can trade him for the last 2 years of his contract and retain a percentage, and that might help us because we do need the money. I mean, it's more about that, and he's getting older. So, but yeah, it's surprising win, and now makes the last 2 games on the trip kind of like just need to win one of the two. And those 2 teams, I have to say, I mean, the Avalanche are great, but they're vulnerable on defense, and they had to come back yesterday. And then we gotta try to get back on the Blues for that game at home that we lost. So if we win one of the 2, then no more West trips, man.
Yeah, with the Blues, they just have to stay disciplined. They're one of those off the rush teams. So I think it's just staying disciplined there, playing hard. I think they'll be up for that one. They'll definitely be up for tomorrow. The latest on Rodriguez and Barkov is they'll be evaluated later today. We're recording this on Friday morning. Because it's a hit to the head for Barkov, there's a good chance he has to be evaluated for concussion or any injury. So I would say there's high probability he doesn't play tomorrow. Even, if it's just a broken nose, you still got to give him a couple of days to recover. I don't know. Knowing Barkov, I don't know if he's going to play. One of those.
I mean, yeah, he's not a typical psycho guy, but also like he's your top player. There's no need to put him out there and like have him have a worse injury. Anyway, like, and again, winning yesterday kind of allows you to like sit him for a game if it is just a broken nose and not like a concussion, obviously. Which it looked to me was more of like the facial part. I don't,
Yeah, when he was in the bench, he was holding on to his nose.
And the face.
A towel. I think he was just bleeding. It was one of those.
I think with Rodriguez, it looked, because he did try to come back. So I think it looked probably more like a bruise on probably his ankle or something, and where like it's gonna be managing pain. So if he's got swelling or pain, he's probably not gonna play or skate until it goes down. But I don't think. I'd be surprised if either is long term. I don't think they would have brought Rodriguez back to the bench if he had like a broken something. And Barkov again. It's probably just protocol, and Maurice cannot make any. When he says evaluated, it's just what the league needs to do. So anyway, hopefully it's just a game or 2 for these guys, and the rest of the trip, and then they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think so. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. They do have a couple days in between the Colorado and the St. Louis game, so that kind of goes in your favor if you need a little extra time for Barkov to be back. And
also if you want to cope somebody up, because I know that we have Lawrence, but like all of a sudden, if both of the guys are going to be out, then half the team is 4th line. So do you bring the Sortif? Do you just like plug Mackey for a game or 2 on the top line? I would like to see that.
Yeah,
against the Blues.
Yeah, I think they know. Like, okay, maybe Rodriguez is probably gonna be good to go, but Barkov is out. I think they'll just plug in Lawrence, I guess. But yeah, I would definitely love to see like Sortif and Mackey come up if both guys are gonna be out tomorrow. Let them play one game, whatever. So you're not like so extremely shorthanded tomorrow. You can't like win those games back to back like that. It's not back to back, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting the way that the Panthers have kind of come along. I think it's good as a fan to kind of educate yourself on. Just learn from the team that you follow, see the trends, see what they do right, see what they do wrong. If you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, why aren't you getting past the first round? Like, what's really causing that? Is it just the coaching? Is it a combination of things? And it's not that hard. I mean, Bruce Cassidy went to Vegas, boom, they won the cup, right? First year there last year. I think you mentioned before that they missed the playoffs, the Golden Knights. The year before, you see with the Panthers last year, what a struggle it was to get the offense going. how many games did we lose? We lost close to 10 games that we should have won. But the system like kicked in towards the end of the end of the year. And once we got into the playoffs, we just started forechecking the crap out of everybody. And that worked. And now the players know that works. And you kind of add, layers on top of that. Now you try to get the offense going a little more. Now maybe you lay off the forecheck a little bit, depending on your opponent, and you try to beat them a different way. It's all about that, man. It's all about matchups and how you get there. And I think that if the Panthers were to go back to the finals this season, things would look much different, including the opponent. I don't think it's going to be the Golden Knights, but yeah, it's just interesting to see, like, as a Panthers fan, we've been following the team since we were young, since the late 90s, the golden Pavel Bure years, or year or two. And it's just interesting to see that evolution of the game. But anyway, let's get around. Let's talk a little bit around the league. Or you wanted to say something?
No, yeah, just saying that I think that might be a good topic for like a solo video on like fans, right? And how we look at the teams and players and stuff, and what we sometimes miss, and the assumptions that we make about how teams are run, and what to actually look for to get the signs of a good or a badly run team. And that we evaluate things sometimes on the surface, right? And not really looking at a culture or a system or why a team can be sustainable and successful over time. I think of the best franchises like the Ravens and football, right? They don't win every year. Sometimes they even miss the playoffs. But that's a team that, however, even though the generations change, the players change, the quarterback changes, like once in a while they find themselves as one of the best teams. They find themselves competing, and eventually once in a while they win a title. Look at the Heat, Miami Heat, same thing. A lot of criticism every year from Heat fans. Older team, this and that, names that nobody knows, etc. on the role players, but they're again on a playoff spot, right? In a playoff spot this year, and they've made two finals, maybe that they probably shouldn't have made with the team that they had, to be honest. And so that's what you want in your team, right? Because you cannot always control that your pick is going to work out, that you're going to land the star, that you guys are going to break out, that everything's going to come together, that you have the right coach and the right. But if you have the right culture and system and the right front office, and you make smart choices, even when you make mistakes, so you can come back from them. As a fan, at least, you just want to be able to know that you're competing, that you have a shot, that maybe you're building towards something, and that your players are bought into whatever it is that you're doing, and that your front office isn't afraid to make the moves when those guys are not really showing up. So that accountability and that intelligence, I guess, has to be there. And some teams have them, some teams don't. Some teams have to go through. We didn't have it with the Panthers for a long time. And then now with Cito and Maurice, we see the difference right away, right? And we see it in Cito the last 3 years, all the players he's found and all the moves he's made. And he's made a couple of mistakes, but, all the stuff he's done, you trust that overall, over a period of time, if he's your general manager for 5 to 10 years, you might win a cup, right? Or you are going to give yourself a shot most years. Maurice as a coach for now, a great system, right, for what we need. And so it's just the way that we sometimes just miss all of that and just go right straight for like the goals, or like who's scoring, or who's good, or who does this or who does that, or blame the goalie or blame the coach. And sometimes that is the case, but oftentimes there's a lot more to it than that. And we need to be honest as fans about our teams and about our players, our coaches, and our GMs. And that's the easier way to hold the team accountable as a fan. So yeah, man, it's and going to the league and with that in mind, you kind of notice it in the way that all the teams are run, right? And I am curious. A team that I'm actually very curious to see what happens by the end of the year is the Lightning, because they're now technically in a wild card spot, but they're not going to last there because the 3 or 4 teams behind them have between 3 and 4 games in hand, and they're only a point behind. So that's going to be. I mean, last year was intense. This year, that wild card spot is going to be super crazy.
Yeah, if you look at it real quick, you're going to have Tampa, Pittsburgh, and Detroit fighting for those 2 spots. Right now, you have the Flyers and the Lightning.
Pittsburgh, the Devils,
The Devils are right there. You're right there. So the Devils are right there. So you got about 4.
And then if the Islanders fall off, then they're going to be the ones fighting. And if Philadelphia falls off, they're going to be the ones. So
Yeah.
There's going to be between 4 and 5 teams, and we don't know. I mean, I think Buffalo and the Senators are harder for them to come back. Montreal's kind of hovered, and I'm not sold on them. But I do think that it's going to be like a 5-team race for 2 spots. And the Lightning, their numbers are not great. The defensive numbers are terrible. Man, some of their players, I mean, Kipper was talking about that yesterday, Kipper and Bourne, like how some of the and the other guys on the show were talking about how some of the Leafs players, not Leafs, the Lightning players are atop the league in minus. They've not been good defensively. Their bottom 6 is not very deep. They play physical and dirty and stuff, but they don't provide a ton of offense. Their power play is really what makes their money still. And if they miss the playoffs after last year being eliminated in the first round, I wonder if Cooper is the one who goes, or if they decide to make bigger team changes or trades, and the Stamkos question and all that. But I'm fascinated by the Lightning because culturally they've been so strong and consistent for a decade now. People forget that I think Cooper made the finals like years ago before this run too, and they went through ups and downs, but they always made the playoffs, and it's kind of fascinating, that this champ team now, it's like not so hot. So again, I just culturally want to see the same with the Hurricanes, who've struggled more this year. I want to see how they handle their goaltending, how they do in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Is Brind'Amour staying or not? Because I think he hasn't gotten his extension yet, so I don't know what they're going to do.
No, and I think he should stay. He has a really good system. They play very hard. They're more defensive.
And they're still young. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have talent. Like, they have a lot of talent. Sebastian Aho, I think it's a great player, both like physically on the ice, but mentally, like you hear him talk. He's done a couple of pressers where he sounds just really mature. Let's get into that. Let's look at, I know we wanted to look at some teams that are maybe in the playoffs right now as far as the position goes, but they're either going to fall off or not make it. I think this is going to be one of those transition years for like 2 or 3 of these teams, whether they're trending upwards or going down. I think the Lightning are the most curious one for sure. Just right off the bat, Steven Stamkos, -16 for the season. I think that's the worst negative on the team. And then couple that with like Nick Paul, -13, Sergachev -15, Braden Point -10, Kucherov is -1. So that tells you everything right there. Man, this is insane. Just looking at the numbers, they barely have anybody on the plus side. They have maybe 6 players on the plus side, and it's like +1, +2. Wow. Yeah. If you, where's the Hedman? Hedman is -5. Jeez. Yeah, I think they're in trouble. I think like Vasilevsky, goalies have down years all the time. We've seen it with Bob. And if you don't have the right defense in front of them, they can kind of fall off. So let's do each conference, or you want to do the division. Let's pick a team each that we think are going to fall off that playoff standing. Let's do the conference, the Eastern Conference. Right now you have in the Atlantic, Boston, Florida, Toronto, and in the Metro you have the Rangers, Hurricanes, Islanders, and in the wild card you have the Flyers and the Tampa Bay Lightning in there. Devils are right behind. They do have some games in hand, so I think they'll take a spot there.
Yeah.
But what teams are you looking at falling off?
I think, to me, the easy choices are the Caps and the Flyers. I think, they've overachieved, and I think that they're going to probably struggle a lot more in the second half, maybe to compete. And I think that's okay, because I think those teams are they haven't accepted it yet fully, although the Flyers did, to rebuild. I think the Caps just kind of have to let go at a certain point, just move on from some of these older players.
Yeah, I think I don't think they were expected to make the playoffs this year. They're
it speaks to their new coach that maybe is a good coach, but I think they're going to fall off, and I think the Flyers will too. I mean, the Islanders could fall off. I think technically the Bruins might not finish first. It could be the Panthers or Maple Leafs who take over, because the Bruins don't have that deep of a team. I know they're going to try to add another centerman at the deadline, so we'll see. But yeah, I would just say, the obvious choices are the Caps and Flyers. The rest are kind of like whatever. I don't think the fallout will be that big for any one other team unless something huge happens or the star gets injured. The West is kind of where I contradict myself here, because I have picked the Stars. I don't think they're going to fall off, so I shouldn't say that, because that's not the right approach. I think the Stars are a little bit fraudulent. If you look at the regular wins versus OT wins, regulation wins, there's a disparity of like 7 games, and I also think that their defense at times can be suspect, and their style can be suspect. I think they can be had in the playoffs by a physical team. We saw them struggle against the Kraken, and then Vegas completely destroyed them. But I don't know that they're going to fall off. I think they're a good, like the Leafs, they're a good regular season team because of their talent, and they're kind of deep. So yeah, I don't know in terms of falling off, man, in the West. I guess. Yeah.
It depends on like what you mean by falling off. Like as far as like the playoff spots, I think the top 3 teams in each division there is going to stay there. Central and the Pacific. If you look at the point difference, if you look at the wild card, there's just no way they would have to play terribly. I think the LA Kings have to be careful. They've been on a bit of a slump lately.
Yeah.
They have a great goal differential due to their goals against. It's very, very low. I think they're the lowest in the league, or at least in the West they are. Yeah. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at the scoring, the goals against, both the Avalanche and the Stars shouldn't be that high up. They had really good starts to their season, and that's why they're still up there. But the Avalanche and the Stars have both allowed more goals than the Kraken, for example. More goals against. And they've allowed more goals against than the Coyotes. They've allowed more goals against than, I don't know, a lot of teams here, the Oilers.
Yeah, no, their defense is not good. And yeah, at the end of the day, I think the Kings are just going through now what we went through on that trip. I think any team is going to go through a lull. The Leafs went through it a couple of weeks ago. I think the Kings will be okay long term. They're a very solid team, and they'll probably try to, make a move and plug some holes. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois also has not been good, or as good as he needs to be. So either that gets corrected, or
no, he's been bad.
Yeah. So they'll figure that out though. I don't think they'll win the cup or whatever, but I trust the Kings to figure it out and still be up there. I think Nashville is a team that could fall off because they have, like Bruno, typical team, like they're really good on offense, but defensively they're very suspect. They have these games like yesterday where they allowed a ton of goals. So I think the Predators could be a team that could be had or taken off by the Oilers, or even Calgary, who's playing better, like taking a wild card spot from them. So I would just say maybe Nashville is the team that falls off. But yeah, I think Colorado, Dallas, those teams are a little bit vulnerable. I think the Jets and the Canucks are a little bit more sound. But again, the experience matters. The deadline comes. Those teams have been to the playoffs before, so any one of them could go on a run. So, Stars have been to the finals. Avalanche has won a cup, so it's not like that's out of the question. But it's wide open this season. I don't think there's a clear number one favorite.
Yeah,
I think they said in a Kipper there was like 7 teams tied for the odds this week, and the Panthers also were like right there with a couple of the teams right behind. So anyway,
yeah, and the Canucks are due for a bit of a slip. They already kind of have been going through it lately. I think in the West the only difference is going to be the Predators get replaced by the Oilers in the wild card, and maybe the Oilers catch up in the division, but that's going to be kind of tough for them. Looking at it, the only change I would say it's the Oilers taking over for either the Predators or the Kraken in the wild card. Seattle has won 6 in a row. The Oilers have also won 6 in a row. The Panthers have won 6 in a row. Um, those are the teams that are kind of hot right now. So in the West, I think that's gonna be said. The Eastern Conference is the one that's really interesting to me, not just in who's gonna make it, but the seeding and how it's gonna end up looking like, because it matters a lot. I think that the Panthers can match up well against Toronto, against Tampa, any of the wild card teams that might end up there, the Devils, Pittsburgh, Detroit. Like, I think the Panthers match up well there. If they end up winning the division, they'll get one of those two wild cards. If they stay in second or third, they'll probably play Toronto, maybe Tampa. I don't know, maybe Detroit if they make a run, even though I don't see it. That's it. Like, I don't think it's going to be one of like 4 teams that the Panthers are going to end up facing. And then in the Metro, that's kind of been a mess this year. I think the Rangers are going to stay up there. I don't think the Hurricanes can catch them. Hurricanes they've been winning, but they've won 4 in a row. But they're just not very like convincing. They just have a really good system, and they kind of have to stick with it and get through it. The Islanders shouldn't be there. They're -6 in goal differential. I think that's just more of the Devils not playing, well and losing all those games. Same with Pittsburgh not being able to be up there. I think that's going to change. I think that's going to be the biggest change. I expect the Rangers, the Hurricanes, and either the Devils or Pittsburgh to be in that top 3 in the Metro. And then the wild card is going to be a Highlander. That's going to be tough. But yeah, I think this is, like I mentioned earlier, this is a year where you see a bit of a transition in some teams. Some teams are trending upwards, some are not. And the last thing I'll say about all this is goaltending is really, really important. There are so many teams struggling because of goaltending alone. You can put the Hurricanes in there, Toronto as well. Look at Tampa, and they started off well with Johansson, but they really needed Vasilevsky. Vasilevsky came back and is still kind of shaky, which is understandable for a goaltender to come back from injury and it might take him up to a month to kind of get the hang of it. That's probably the biggest concern with the Maple Leafs, with Wall coming back in like 3 weeks. He's probably going to need some time to kind of get in the groove of things. So having a good backup, having a starting goaltender that can give you some above average saves, and then having a good defense in front of that. Those are like the main 3 things that you need to start building to build around, so you can have that consistency year in, year out that some of these teams have. It's due to the goaltender and beyond. I mean, the Bruins are the prime example. I think Swayman is like better than Allmark, and he's technically considered a backup, even though I think he's been the better goalie this season. So yeah, I think there's a good chance the Panthers do catch the Bruins. We play them 2 more times in March, so we don't, the Panthers can't really. There's not much you can do about it now. Just try to keep winning as much as possible, and I do think it's important. I think it's important to play one of those wild card teams in the first round. Chances are you're going to be able to beat them just based on the matchup alone. And if not, then it is what it is. You're going to have to go through one of 3 or 2 of, Tampa, Toronto, or Boston anyway. So you might as well get it out of your system early. But I think it's easier to just kind of get through a wildcard team to start. But yeah. All right. I think that's all we have for today. Anything else you want to talk about there?
No, man. That makes sense. We'll do more short videos and stuff as we go. But yeah, we're in good place now with the Panthers.
Yeah. So Panthers against Colorado tomorrow. Colorado's on a 4-game winning streak. The Panthers are on a 6-game winning streak. That should be a really good matchup. Fortunately for the Panthers, I think we'll be out at least Barkov or one of those 2 guys, Barkov and Evan Rodriguez. So we'll see what happens there. We'll know more this afternoon. By the time you watch this video, we'll probably have an answer as to who's going to play tomorrow. And we'll go for there. All right, guys. We'll catch you guys next week. And yeah, let's hope that the Panthers can have a good week and and we see what happens with the Nylander contract. That should be fun. Peace.